the bars weren't real. The guards weren't real. But the fear, the fear was absolute. It was supposed to be a simple 2-week psychological study, a simulated prison set up in the basement of a university. 24 ordinary college students, randomly assigned to be either prisoners or guards. The new inmate, a bright, idealistic student named Alex, known only as prisoner 8612, laughed it off on the first day it was a gamey. A way to earn $15 a day. He smiled at one of the guards, a fellow student he recognized from his sociology class named Miller. Miller didn't smile back. His face was a cold, blank mask behind a pair of reflective sunglasses. "There will be no smiling, 8612, he said, his voice flat and unfamiliar. Alex's smile faded. He saw a flicker of something in Miller's eyes, a shadow he didn't recognize. He was about to learn that in a prison where the walls were fake but the power was real, the most dangerous monster isn't the one in the cell next to you, but the one hiding inside the person you thought you knew. The experiment began under the supervision of Dr. Philip Zim, a charismatic professor who took on the role of prison superintendent. The goal was to study the psychological effects of perceived power, to see what would happen when good people were put in a toxic situation. The prisoners were stripped, deloused, and given rough smocks with numbers on them. Their names were taken away. The guards were given khaki uniforms, and mirrored sunglasses that prevented any eye contact, making them anonymous and intimidating. From the very first day, the roles became terrifyingly real. The guards, led by the increasingly authoritarian Miller, began to test their power. It started with small things. Push-ups as punishment. Arbitrary rules. Waking the prisoners up with shrieking whistles for middle-of-the-night head counts. Alex, a natural leader, tried to reason with them. "Come on, Miller. This is just a study. We're all on the same team here." "You are prisoner 8612, Miller responded, his voice cold. "I am Mr. Correctional Officer. We are not a team." The line had been drawn. On the second day, the prisoners rebelled. They ripped off their numbers and barricaded themselves in their cells. It was a moment of unity, a brief, defiant stand. The guards' response was swift and brutal. They broke into the cells with fire extinguishers, stripped the prisoners naked, and took away their beds. Alex, identified as the ringleader, was thrown into the hole, a small pitch-black closet that served as solitary confinement. He spent hours in the crushing darkness, the artificiality of the experiment melting away, replaced by a primal, terrifying fear. When he was released, the atmosphere had changed. The rebellion was broken. The prisoners were defeated. The guards, emboldened by their victory, escalated their methods. They began to use psychological torture, turning the prisoners against each other. They created a privileged cell for inmates who behaved, giving them their beds and better food. Sowing, jealousy, and distrust. They would force prisoners to repeat their numbers endlessly, to insult each other, to perform humiliating tasks. Alex watched in horror as his fellow students transformed. The prisoners became docile, withdrawn, and depressed. The guards became more creative in their cruelty. Miller, in particular, seemed to relish his role, inventing new, sadistic games. He was no longer a sociology student. He was a warden in his own private kingdom of pain. The most terrifying part for Alex was that he could see both sides. He felt the crushing despair of the prisoner, but he also felt a dark, thrilling flicker of understanding for the guards' power. He realized he wasn't just a victim of the experiment. He was a part of it. The darkness was in him, too. Dr. Zimbardo, the superintendent, was no longer an objective reader. He was consumed by his role. When worried parents called, he would try to placate them, speaking as a prison official, not a scientist. He had become the very thing he was studying. The prison was no longer an experiment. It was his reality. On the 5th day, a new prisoner arrived. He saw the broken, shuffling state of the other inmates and refused to comply. He went on a hunger strike. The guards forced him into the hole, trying to break him. Miller came up with a new, cruel idea. He told the other prisoners that if they gave up their own blankets, the hunger striker would be released. Every single prisoner but one chose to keep their blanket. Alex stared at his fellow inmates, at their hollow, selfish eyes. The prison hadn't just broken them, it had corrupted them. It was at that moment he realized escape wasn't about getting out of the basement. It was about saving their souls. He had to break the experiment itself. He knew he couldn't fight the guards physically. He had to target the one person who still had a foot in the outside world. Dr. Zimbardo, he had to remind the scientist that he was a scientist. Alex began his own quiet rebellion. He started refusing to eat, but he wasn't just on a hunger strike. He began to act crazy. He would scream uncontrollably, then fall into a dead silence. He would speak in nonsensical riddles. He was trying to present Zimbardo with a variable he had eons accounted for, a complete psychological breakdown. The guards were confused. Their usual methods of control didn't work. The other prisoners were terrified of him. Finally, they dragged him before Superintendent 8612 is broken. We don't know what to do. Alex looked at Zimbardo, his eyes wild with a carefully constructed madness. The walls are melting, he whispered, his voice trembling. I can't tell what's real anymore. He was speaking the truth, but he was using it as a weapon. For the first time, Zimbardo saw not a subject, but a suffering young man. A flicker of the doctor, the man of ethics, broke through the role of the superintendent. He saw the genuine terror in Alex's eyes and realized the experiment had gone too far. The line between simulation and reality had been erased. The next morning, on only the 6th day of the planned 2-week experiment, Dr. Zimbardo walked into the cell block. The experiment is over, he announced, his voice heavy with the dawning horror at what he had created. A strange, confusing silence fell over the basement. The guards slowly took off their sunglasses, and for the first time in days, they looked like what they were. Scared, confused, college students. Miller, the sadistic officer, looked at his own hands as if he didn't recognize them. The prisoners, even when told they were free, were hesitant, their spirits so thoroughly crushed they had forgotten how to leave a cage, even one with an open door. The story of the Stanford Prison Experiment is a powerful, true, and terrifying warning. It proves that the line between good and evil is not a wall of stone, but a fragile, painted line on the floor, and that the most dangerous prisons are not the ones we build for others, but the ones we willingly create for ourselves. If this chill and true story of a psychological experiment gone wrong left a mark on you, please show your support by hitting that like button. Subscribe and ring the notification bell for more true stories that explore the darkest corners of the human mind. Now, we have a question for you. Do you believe that power corrupts everyone? Or do you think some people are strong enough to resist it? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you for watching.